This is Libby Road and the Sound Epistemology Podcast. This episode of the podcast is a recording of our SE 101 Clubhouse Room in which William Owen, also known as Deviant Robot, was our special guest. Will is active in the Street Epistemology Discord and has a website, deviantrobot.com, that I'll link in the description. We didn't have a ton of questions to answer in this room, but we had a great demonstration of a street epistemology conversation between Will and a lovely audience member named Leslie that explored a claim about Jesus' divinity. We were also able to get some great feedback on street epistemology, the conversation itself, and feedback on our clubhouse room, which we typically have on Saturday afternoons Pacific time. Let's check it out.
Welcome everyone to the SE 101 room in the Street Epistemology Club, a room for creating critical thinkers. We are currently going to be taking questions from people down in the audience who are interested in learning about street epistemology. Today we have William to help answer your questions. He goes by Will, actually. So please raise your hands to ask your question. We just ask that once your question has been answered, that you bring yourself down to the audience, so we can let the next person come on and ask their question. If you'd rather not come on stage, you can also send me a back channel message, and I'll ask the question on your behalf. You can tap on my profile, and there should be a message button there. And I'll ask the question on your behalf. You can also access the back channel by using the little paper airplane in the bottom right corner of the app, if you're using the iOS or Android application. And this room has been created as a learning environment, and the replays are on, and it is also being recorded, if I'm not mistaken, David. Will, if you wouldn't mind just telling the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll pass the mic on to David.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so my name's William. I've been a lifelong atheist. I've been part of the street epistemology community for about a year now. I guess I'm a philosophical skeptic. I've been doing a bunch of things more recently, I guess under the banner of Deviant Robot. I've got a website kindly linked at the top. I've been helping out with the Street Epistemology website, helping sort of organize and sort of manage that project. I've been quite vocal about some of my thoughts on street epistemology, and generally think people have a strange view of it, which I've been keen to engage with people. I do a weekly live stream called Standard Deviation on Twitch and YouTube, and I also have ad hoc conversations with interesting people. Most recently, I've been experimenting with my friend Joe and engaging in SE conversations in VR chat, in virtual reality, which has been super fun. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Will, for being here. Thanks, Erling and Alfonso, for being here and helping us with this. My name is David. I'm a student of street epistemology. I'm excited to have Will here today. My understanding of street epistemology is that it is a compassionate conversation tool that helps create a space for us to respectfully explore and examine the sufficiency of the reasons and the reliability of the methods our conversation partner uses to assign a level of confidence that a belief or a claim or a conclusion they hold is likely true. This is a Q&A, as Early mentioned. We're also opening up the room to have a claim examined from the audience, if you would like. So keep that in mind. I want to go ahead and get to as many questions as we can. So if we already have some people that want to come up on stage to ask questions, let's go ahead and get that going. That way we make sure that we're able to answer as many questions as we can. Hello, Leslie.
Hi, how are you?
Great, welcome.
Why, thank you. So I'm somewhat active on the Discord SE server. And guys, I don't want to be controversial. I hate being controversial. So feel free to ignore my question if it doesn't work. I noticed that, so this is probably something you've heard before, the atheist kind of connection to SE. And because of the baggage of the organization, I think it renders that way. And as one of your guests introduced himself that way, I'm wondering if you're trying to get away from that, and if so, how?
Great question. And what I failed to do during the lounge, please forgive me, Will, since you are a guest today, I want you to be um, the first one to respond to any questions unless they're directed to somebody else. I want you
Sure.
to have first crack at answering them. So anytime somebody asks a question, just feel free to go ahead and start answering it. You don't have to wait on us. And then if I have anything to add, I might add or I might do some follow up. Would that be okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely fine. No problems at all.
Okay,
Um,
great.
it's a great question. I like it a lot, and I think it's one that's important. I don't think it's. Firstly, I know there are lots of people who hold a religious belief that practice street epistemology, um, and I can't speak to how courageous they feel in doing that, but I can say that they certainly seem to be enjoying it, and finding it useful. The second thing I would say is I don't think I think there is sometimes there it would be disingenuous, I think, to say that there aren't some people within the street epistemology community that wish to use it explicitly to convert people to atheism. Um, I think that might be an unfortunate, as you say, hangover from the original inception of street epistemology from A Manual for Creating Atheists by Peter Boghossian. But I can say that the the refinements of the method have made it no less effective in being a tool potentially for talking people out of a religious idea, but have made it more acceptable, I think, to a broader range of subjects. And I think talking to people about all kinds of positions and trying to encourage them to reflect on their reasons is useful and effective with SE. And I can give you an example of a claim that I've been exploring quite a lot recently that people have made, which is that they believe there is no God. And I found street epistemology a very effective tool to help people explore their confidence level in that claim. And I tend to be quite skeptical of people that would claim, for example, that they are 100% confident in the claim that there is no God. It's as useful a claim to explore as any other. I hope that answered your question in some way, Leslie.
Are there links to those discussions somewhere online?
Oh no, sadly not. But I really want to start recording them. I'm not courageous enough yet to post all my all my videos, but I'm really looking forward to it. For me, it's as an important question as any other, and I think that I would be concerned that there was a street epistemologist that felt that there was a truth claim that couldn't be explored with SE or shouldn't be explored with SE. I think everything
Well,
should be fair game.
well, if I may, a lot of atheists today are describing themselves as lacking a belief. So in a way, they're opting out of the discussion for that very reason. They're saying, I'm off limits because I lack a belief. And I believe that's kind of, it poses a problem. But that's my 2 cents on that. So thank you for the answer.
You're very welcome.
Real quick comment on that last part. It's a very good observation and point, especially the fact that atheists often describe themselves as lacking belief. Often this is done in the context of like religious conversations and gods. But I think that in our day-to-day life, we sometimes will take a position on something, maybe knowing or realizing that it is just a belief or and I've actually I'm still learning the method myself, and I've had the chance to actually practice SE, and I would say that one of the best sessions I had with the few I've had has been with an atheist. And I think atheists will, and I myself as an atheist have also been in the end of receiving the questions a few times now, actually. And so I think that as an atheist myself, I would say I can still participate, and often I've seen many others also participate to being on the receiving end of a SE.
One thing I think that's useful to reflect on is that I don't really think people are motivated by certainty or conviction or a pretense to know things for sure. I think when most people think about what I think is ultimately important, I should say, is that people just have sufficient confidence to motivate action in the world. So an atheist just might be somebody that's not sufficiently confident in the idea of a God to motivate them to act in the world in the way that in line with the idea that there is God. And that's sufficient, I think. I don't think anybody needs to be more definitive than that. I think it's mostly about how you choose to act in the world that defines what's important to you and to a certain extent what you truly do believe in.
Right, but sometimes there's a disconnect between what you say and how you promote yourself. Yeah, so I'm a theist, if that's relevant, or for whatever reason. So
yeah, no problem.
I think something Will that that you said that was important, and what I was gonna maybe add is instead of looking at it as like either you believe it or not, is your level of confidence that a claim is likely true. More of a scale rather than a binary belief or not belief. I think that might be useful in kind of looking at it.
So it could be so when I talk about sufficient confidence, it could be interesting. So for example, the narrative of hell has been sufficiently motivating for a lot of people to inspire action in being a believer or acting as a believer in the world. And by acting, I don't mean to suggest that there's any falsity to this, but I'm just saying choosing to act in the world as a believer. But this might be not so much motivated by a confidence of the truth, but a fear of the consequences of being wrong, for example. So that's what I mean. Sufficient confidence could not necessarily be wholly dependent on whether you believe it to be true, but how, to a certain extent, how much you fear the consequences of being wrong.
Yeah, I think that's why these conversations are so important, is because it's what causes us to act a certain way. And our actions are really what affect the rest of us, not simply believing or not believing.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah. I don't think we have any other hands raised. Leslie, do you have any other questions while you're up here?
Oh, sure. I have tons of questions and opinions.
Okay.
Lady after my own heart.
It's something I talk about a fair amount. By the way, I stumbled onto street epistemology because I love epistemology.
Awesome.
Not necessarily in the formal sense, but in the sense of why do people think the way they think? And when do they push that belief, that thing to say, I believe this now, right? What's the triggering point? I just think it's fascinating. I just love that stuff. I wish there was more epistemology actually in street epistemology, but that's a different topic.
I think I know what you mean.
So one thing that we know from recent cognitive science and different studies is that the dialogue itself can change how you perceive an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example. If I walked out the door and went for a walk and 3 people stopped me and said, "How are you?" I would begin to formulate a belief about how I felt just because they asked the question.
Right.
And I wonder if there's been any research on that in terms of street epistemology. Is the questioning itself and maybe the dominant theme? I know there's not supposed to be a theme in street epistemology, but a dominant direction of the questioning ending up influencing the belief and the outcome more than the actual epistemology. So what I'm saying is the social dynamic sometimes being ignored here?
I think yeah, like there are lots of definitely things that are in play. Well, it depends, and the part of the problem is I think the optics of a particular street epistemology encounter are likely to be largely defined by the sorts of videos Anthony Magnabosco, for example, Reed and the others are doing, where they go out with a sort of GoPro and have those encounters. But I think that's certainly only really one version of one way of doing street epistemology. And I think that there are definitely other ways of interacting with people. So you can run a street epistemology conversation with a beloved one, friend, family member, etc. But it would be certainly true to say that at all times and in all cases there will be some context, whether it's that you've suddenly been accosted by a stranger in the street, or whether it's because somebody's come up and tried to talk to you in a slightly strange fashion. So I think we can never escape context, and I would also suggest that there's a necessary biasing of rationalism. For example, street epistemology has been accused of having a hidden agenda sometimes of rationalism, which seems strange to me. But I think it would have to capitulate to that accusation. I don't think it could claim to be free of bias in that sense. I think also it's very difficult to I think it's also very difficult to take your cards off the table entirely. As an atheist, it's perhaps never going to be fully possible for me to have a conversation with a theist and not in ways that I'm perhaps not even necessarily aware of be influencing that decision, and probably to a much greater extent than I would notice. And so it probably is for a lot of positions. We always have dogs in the fight, whether we think we're showing it or not, I think. But it's something to guard against, for sure.
Yeah, there was a concern brought up a couple of weeks ago about the idea of not being biased or not having, an agenda. And I think something was missed there, because that can be a goal, whether you can actually do that or not, but striving to eliminate as much bias as possible, like a scientist would do. All scientists are biased in some way, but the goal is to eliminate as much of that bias as you can, and let that be a goal, whether you can actually accomplish that or not.
Yeah. I think it's critically important that before anybody engages in an SE conversation, or even in fact, to be honest with you, a lot of conversations in general, that we take a moment to reflect on our own motivations. Recently in a street epistemology review video that I did, I was lucky enough to participate in, where we reviewed one of Anthony's videos where he was talking to some Mormon gentleman. He I felt was chasing the high a little bit. He was looking. He'd said that he had had some successful previous conversations and was seemingly a little bit too eager to chase down the conversation with the Mormon gentleman that came along, enthusiastic for it. And that I think that energy caused him to have a less effective conversation than he would have otherwise had. So certainly checking our own motivations, making sure that we are actually, for the purposes of street epistemology, honestly looking to explore epistemology rather than to win, have a successful conversation, to influence or reduce confidence. All of those things I find quite antithetical to the ambitions of street epistemology.
Yeah, I think it takes a rather disciplined person to appreciate that. It's a human nature kind of thing to want to score points, I guess. And I find myself, doing that as well. I've got this great argument, I want to trot it out. Whether it's stealth or not, whether it's formed in a question or not is a different issue. I do get concerned because when it comes to dramatic worldviews like God or religion, pro and con, actually, to convert it or to deconvert as an adult is a fairly dramatic thing. And I think those types of conversations are actually best done with somebody who's going to be with you beyond a singular encounter, who cares about you, actually, who's going to be there for your life. That's my opinion. Because life is tough, and I think, I don't know. I think we live in a very litigious almost society, just in terms of our conversation. Prove it to me, prove it to me, prove it to me. And SE is a very gentle approach. But I would hope that there would be a recognition of that, and there does seem to be. So
I really want to agree with that. Like that's one of my concerns about SE is that it can be very effective and leave somebody in a very unhelpful place. And it inherently within the method, within the approaches and the tools, there's not really anything there to address that. And there can be things. So, for example, handing people a card and saying, you can contact me here if you want to continue this conversation, if you'd like to talk to other people, recommending support websites, for example, can be very useful in this grid. But I think I would like to see a little more empathy and a little less, what should I say, form in SE. Really listening to the person and feeling and empathizing with them, I think, is not just a useful way to be able to help ask the next useful question, but also recognize whether that question might be phrased slightly differently and be gentler on the person you're speaking to. In a lot of my conversations, I've noticed that it's sometimes more effective. Effective is there you go again, right? It's sometimes better to be asking or giving a little bit of information or nudging somebody in a more useful direction than necessarily applying a strong SE method. That's a very silly statement that would need some justification. But inherently, I think I'd just say that empathy is a useful thing for street epistemologists to work on. In fact, for everybody to work on, frankly.
Well, I think it goes beyond empathy. I think it gets into humility.
Humility. Well, I'm English, so I had my humility removed at birth. I'm afraid it wasn't available to me as an option.
Yes, but if you're British, then you're charming about it, so we forgive you. Right, you have they have that great blend of, self-deprecation along with, I guess, hubris.
Extraordinary arrogance, yes.
which tends to work until those colonists, got fancy ideas in their heads, and all hell broke loose.
Leslie, while we have you, And since I don't see any other hands raised right now, and as a theist, what do you have any suggestions on how to improve street epistemology from your point of view?
Well, I guess you'd have to define it first. I'm noticing that there's different definitions, and as much as you say that it's divorced from atheism, I know quite a few atheists whose sole agenda is to, and they would say this in street epistemology, to convert. They wouldn't use those words, but so how do you define street epistemology? I guess
That is a great question, and I've been arguing about that for. I've had some really lengthy conversations with people who are in the community that have gotten almost the most difficult to resolve about exactly this. What is the definition of street epistemology? I think I have a slightly atypical. Well, I didn't think it was atypical, but I feel like it might be a definition. So
Let's hear it.
I quite liked yours at the beginning, David. By the way, it wasn't bad. It was certainly a lot better than some I've heard. But my definition is that street epistemology is a movement that encourages people to engage in conversations that help others honestly reflect on why they hold their beliefs. And I've thought about it a lot, and for me, I dislike it when street epistemology is referred to as a tool or a method. And the reason I dislike that is I don't really think it is any one particular tool or method. It's certainly a collection of tools and methods for a start. And the question then is, well, do we always use all the tools? And the answer is probably no. And could we do SE without any of those tools? And possibly is the answer there. So I don't think SE is any of the tools. And we should certainly be looking for new tools to bring on board to replace tools that we find less effective. And if that's the case, then the question is, how do we measure the efficacy of a tool in SE? And I think the way we would have to do that is by measuring it against the ambition. And I think the ambition is to help other people have conversations that let them honestly reflect on why they hold their beliefs. And I had a little test thought experiment for this, which was if we could find a way of meditating that would promote honest reflection on why you hold the beliefs you hold, would SE be more engaged in promoting this way of meditating than in engaging people in street interviews? If the meditation was a better way to help people honestly reflect on the beliefs that they hold, would this form of meditation replace street interviews or the Socratic question and answer, or would we stick to the Socratic method and answer?
Well, I think that's sorry, Denham.
No, go ahead.
So I think that's fascinating. The thing I latched onto immediately was other people. And what I find is that street epistemology is used to influence other people, not me, but you other people who are holding these wrong beliefs. I'm going to help you. So as a theist, that's what I would perhaps object to. But that's perhaps not what I meant.
I completely understand that interpretation, and you're right. But I think for me, it's about the locus of the conversation. So where is the center of the conversation? And I think in a street epistemology conversation, the center, the locus of the conversation should remain with the other person. It shouldn't matter at all what I believe. My view really shouldn't be on the table. Not because I'm hiding it, but because it's really important for me to help you feel like you've reflected, that you're doing that work to notice things about the reasons you have for holding your belief.
Right. Which might imply that the other person hasn't reflected as much as you have.
Ah, yes. Well, that's a because have you read a manual for creating atheists?
No, I have not.
Oh, I can't recommend it, unfortunately, but I also really object to the first paragraph in there. In the first, I'll try and remember it roughly from memory, but the quote at the beginning of Manual Creating Atheists talks about helping people of faith value reason. um,
Right.
and I think that kind of language needs to be removed entirely from this kind of discourse. People of faith certainly value reason. And to assume that they don't is a very silly and unfortunate way of framing those kinds of conversations, I think.
And an SE way of doing it.
And a very un-SE way indeed of doing it. Yes.
So
Yes.
one of the things that you mentioned that for me is spot on because I do enjoy thinking about beliefs and how people form them is
Mm.
introspection. But there is a built-in tension between a method that is trying to promote introspection while doing it with an audience, which actually I think gets in the way of introspection. All of a sudden I'm performing. All of a sudden I'm persuading. I don't know how to
Mm.
say it other than that. I'm not really sitting down and saying, okay, Leslie, in a very safe kind of deep environment where I can go there. I think Essie's a little counter to that because of
When
the way
do,
it's.
can I ask what do you mean by audience in that sense?
Well, right now we have an audience.
Oh,
In
right,
every
yeah.
SE session on Discord, there's an audience usually. On every, even Anthony's videos online, he's filming the people. They're aware there's an audience. Whether they're
Mm.
actually standing there listening, it doesn't matter. They're aware of the audience. So I've never seen it done well. Maybe that's
Ah, well, there
the
you
first I've
go.
ever seen it done well. Right?
So this is
But
what's known as survivorship bias. Yes, all the ones you've seen are ones you've seen, and therefore all of
yeah,
the ones you've seen have had an observer.
100%. Yeah. By golly. But that's the way it's taught. So that's
Yeah,
the way.
I think I don't know if I would agree that it's the way it's taught, but it's certainly the way the visual. I talked about the optic before, and I would agree with you. And I think it's unhelpful, um, but it's sadly also necessary. If you want to show people it, then it has to be also visible in some way. And I would agree that that's look. I mean, again, it's interesting. I would say to watch promoting my own video, but the video that I appeared in with Anthony in the SE review, and actually listened to Anthony. He very much reflected on the fact that he perhaps was also not in the right frame of mind because he realized that this would be a good video. And,
Right.
and he lamented on the actual dangers of that mindset, and actually, full credit to him for recognizing that, because somebody who's been recording these things and putting them out for so long, I think it would be quite easy to become blind to that. So yeah, it certainly is a concern. I think the best conversations are the ones you have. One of the reasons why I quite like Essie is I feel like I was doing it a long time before I met the
Right.
idea. And I used to have conversations with taxi drivers. Um, you can actually end up having very deep and profound conversations with taxi drivers if you're polite enough and respectful. And part of the reason is that the conversation is entirely disposable. At the moment that the journey ends, there's no expectation you'll ever see each other again. And in those moments with a complete stranger where you can say whatever you like, I've had some fascinating conversations with people about their beliefs and about religion and about their reasons for acting in the world the way they do, and really had some fantastic moments of aporia. This is the SE term for sort of sudden pauses and reflections that are evident in people's behavior. And it's been charming, and it's the disposableness, and it's the privacy, it's the confessional, if you like, component of it, where you can be honest in those moments. And I think you're right. It's different if there's an audience and that there's a video camera.
It completely is. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm reflecting on our society at large, and I think if there's one thing we've learned in the last 20 years, it's how social we are. Social television, social media, social news, social forums. We like getting together and discussing things, and it in turns influences who we are, and what we believe. Not necessarily for good epistemological reasons, which I would like to see understood a little bit better, but that's my 2 cents on that.
These reflections are all fascinating, Leslie, and it's making me really deeply wanting to ask you about your religious belief.
Well, you can, and we could do a session on that if that would be helpful.
I would not want to sidetrack this conversation, but yeah, I would love to because I love speaking to people like you. Sorry, David.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say, I don't think we have a queue going on right now. If that's something that you're both comfortable doing here, you've got the green light if you want to do a demonstration of street epistemology. I might have Early do a quick reset before we do that, though. Would that be okay?
It's fine with me.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
just real quick, just a reminder to everyone, welcome to the Street Epistemology Club in the, the SE 101 room in the Street Epistemology Club. We're currently taking questions from the members of the audience. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hands. We are actually about to go through an SE session, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. Yeah, but if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to send me a back channel message. You can tap on my profile and click on message, and I'll read the question on your behalf. So the room is created as a learning environment, and it is being recorded, and the replays are on. So Will and Leslie, if you want to go ahead, looking forward to it.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, now I'm all nervous. It's as a demonstration. It feels like if I need to produce the rabbit from the hat now. This is scary stuff. So Leslie, have you ever had an SE conversation before?
Oh yes, quite a few on both ends, but I'm not very good at it either. So.
Oh, excellent, cool.
Way in the dark here.
Well, I tend to like to have conversations with people more than necessarily formal SE, but maybe we can start off with just having a conversation and then swing into an SE claim, if that's okay.
Sure.
So you're a theist. Could you describe your views?
Sure. I'm a Christian. I'm a pretty typical Christian, I suspect. Basically the typical gospel you've heard, one God who created everything. Mm-hmm. Triune God created man, loves man. Man decided to go his own way. God said, how can I fix this? Became human, put some, ipso facto, cross, sin, died on cross, and now people can accept that or not. So that's the basic gospel and my beliefs.
That's the short and sweet version. I like it.
Yeah.
Excellent. So the classic SE approach here would be to clarify the claim. So could we go with the truth claim that the God of the Christian Bible is real?
Sure.
Cool. I'm just writing this down because I'm so bad at remembering things.
Yep.
Well, actually, do you know what it is? It's more like I'm so good at misremembering things. So I'm going to write it down. The Christian Bible is real. Okay, excellent. Awesome. And so then in classic SE style, could you just demonstrate could you give your confidence that claim is true from a scale from 1 to 100?
Well, I'm going to make a caveat before I say this, because
sure.
I actually, despite the recent usage of the term, I'm a skeptic. So I actually don't believe much of anything. And if I say I believe something like 60%, that's really strong for me.
Gotcha.
So I'm definitely more on the plus side than the negative side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, 80, 90%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. Strong.
Gotcha.
Well, see, the thing about faith or whatever you want to call it, this belief, is it's half belief, half commitment. It's not simply
Okay.
just I believe this, but it's I believe this and I'm committed to it. But in the way that you're committed to, I heard I heard an apologist talking about this once, and she said, well, it's like I'm committed to my husband. That doesn't mean that I can't get evidence that he's cheating on me, but it's going to take a certain amount for me to actually even explore it because I've already committed to that. And so that's where my belief lies. It's not just a belief, it's a belief plus a commitment.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Could we separate those two things then potentially? Could we
Oh,
say
absolutely. I do that all the time. Go ahead.
some percentage of this was like your confidence that it was true, and another percentage that would represent your commitment to the idea being true?
Well, I'm going to say it's no. When I said 80-90%, that's my confidence that it's true.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I'm even capable of separating them. I'm not sure humans can actually do that, but yeah.
No problem. So 80% would be true for anybody. Would be high for anybody, I would say. And as for a skeptic, that's pretty high. So can I ask what your reason for your confidence being that high might be? What's your best reason?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, gosh, it is. I love the marriage analogy because it's very much like that. It's like you don't marry your spouse for one reason. There's lots of them. And actually, I've been discussing this topic with atheists for quite a while, and actually, I've become more convinced over time. So I'm sorry, I lost the I lost your question.
No, that's
but was
quite
it why?
okay.
Was it why? Yeah.
What's the reason? And ideally, if you could pinpoint like the reason that's most persuasive to you, the God of the Christian Bible is real.
I'm not sure I can do the reason that's most persuasive. I'm
okay.
I'm not sure I can do that. At least not right now. I have multiple reasons. Probably at least one of them is I've walked it out, right? So it's a way of life, and I've walked it out, and I've seen it work, and I've seen it work through every situation that I could encounter, and it's stood the test of time in terms of philosophy and a way of life.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can just do that one. I mean, as I say, there's many more, but we could do that one.
So you'd like to explore the idea that it has stood the test of time?
No, I'd actually prefer to do an overview of all of them, but
okay, sure. I mean, we can take this in whichever direction you'd like. So I'm happy.
So I became a Christian as an adult. So I did not inherit my religion. And so actually everybody in my family did. So I think I'm somewhat unusual in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started to look around at this, a lot of people say things like, anyway, I lost my train of thought there. I recognize I was born into a world that already posited God. I did not make up the concept of God. The concept of God and religion already was part of the world. So as I began to explore this, I looked at the alternatives. There is a God, there is a God and he is good. There isn't a God, or there is a God and he is bad. And to be honest, that third one actually didn't occur to me at the time. It's only come to me later as I've talked to people. But as I looked at those, I realized about myself in general, there's no way I'm going to come up with an answer to that question on my own. It's just not something I'm capable of doing. Maybe there are others who could do it, but I realized I could not do it. So I said, well, if that's true, there is a God and he is good, then he's got to put something here somehow, somewhere for me to explore. And then so I began to look around and see if there was somebody or something that claimed that. So that was my genesis of
Okay.
looking at
So you identified a few different scenarios and forgive me if I get this wrong, because but I may have misheard. But you said that the scenarios you explored were there is a God and he is good, there is a God and he is bad, and was the other one that there is no God?
Yes, there is no God.
Gotcha. Okay.
But as I look at those, I can't get anywhere. I can't make any progress on there is no God. There's no place for me to explore there is no God. So it's kind of a non-starter. I mean, it may be true, but I can't actually investigate it. So I said, okay, that's off the table. And the is no God and he is bad actually falls into the same category. I can't explore it.
Okay. So that there is no God might be true, but you feel that you can't explore that idea, so
Yes.
you dismissed it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't. I did. There's nothing I could do with it, so there's no action with that.
Okay. If there had been a way of exploring the idea that there was no God, do you
Absolutely.
think that would have been useful to you? Gotcha.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'd still do it if there was a way to do it.
And how did you explore the idea that there is a God and he is good? How did you explore this idea?
Well, again, I recognized, so if there's this being that created everything, the difference between me and that being is profound. And there's no way I'm going to get there without that being's help. They're gonna have to make the first move. I got no cards here. I got 0 cards. Not only that, I have everybody in the world shouting at me that their religion is right and this is right. So
Gotcha.
So I had to pursue it. That's the way I felt it was reasonable to pursue it, was to look at it from that point of view.
So you felt that the distance between you and this deity was profound and significant, so that you could never really come to an understanding of God without the help of that God? Was that right?
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. If there is a God, then myself, don't get there unless that God somehow is involved with the process.
And how do you believe that then God did help you identify?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. And can you explain how he did that, or she did that?
Well, it was a long time ago, and so I this was not a quick process for me. Because I can't. There's, as I say, there's 2 parts to the Christian narrative, if you will. One is the belief in God, which in another time frame would have been a no-brainer, right? Of course, there's a God, and so, but today that's an extra step. But the second step is, yes, I want to follow that God. Yes, I'm signing up to represent that God. So those are 2 different things, and I struggled with both at various points. I'm actually fairly settled, if you will, in it now, but I struggled with it for probably about a decade.
I gotcha. Okay, so but you presently you can't remember how God persuaded you that he was real or she was real?
No, I can. Sure, of course I can.
Oh, my apologies.
Well, it was a variety of things, right? So I read a lot. I read a lot of commentary. I read about Jesus, the historical Jesus, because that was one of the claims. I mean, I was looking for somebody who claimed that, and he seemed to claim, look, I'm God. So I had to go and look and say, okay, well, did he really claim that? And that took a while to figure that out. And okay, what does that mean that he claimed that? Is that credible? Are the documents credible? And then talking with people who were following that way, helped a lot. And then on top of that, exploring questions like, well, if there is a God, then why is the world so crappy? And if there is a God, then why are his followers so crappy? No matter which God you choose, he's got pretty crappy followers.
True.
We
can all be embarrassed by people on our own side. That's
maybe nurses. Maybe there's the God of the nurses. That's probably, I don't know. I think they're pretty nice people. Yeah.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, I think you said the historicity of Jesus, the historical truth of Jesus and his claims, talking with other people in the Christian faith, and struggling with the idea of, if there is a God, then why are so many religious people bad, and why is the world bad sometimes?
Right. So that's the classic questions. Yes.
So if it could be demonstrated that the God of that Jesus was not, as reported in the Bible, hadn't existed or had never said any of the things that were in the Bible, would that change your view on whether or not?
Yes, absolutely, it would. Yes, it would.
Okay. And would that mean that you would no longer be able to believe in that idea?
Yeah, pretty much.
Gotcha. And so what methods did you use to determine that the historical Jesus as defined in the Bible were true representations of what happened?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's there's a lot packed into that statement, right? So I don't necessarily believe that every phrase is necessarily accurate to the nth degree. It's more the overall context. So a lot of research, I've basically done a ton of research on it.
Is it possible that the research you did to clarify the historicity of Jesus, is it possible that that research has led you to an incorrect conclusion?
It's possible. Yeah, sure. Anything's possible. It's just not likely, just because of who I am and the way I do things. I mean, to be honest, I had to fight my skepticism. What I realized at one point was skepticism against religion is oops.
Hello? I fear we may have lost our conversation partner.
Yeah,
maybe her phone died or something.
Oh. A conversation that ended in an oops.
While we wait for Leslie to come back, how do you feel about how this conversation is going, Will?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think it's interesting. I think Leslie's view has been one of trying to be skeptical, and I think that's admirable. And I think Leslie believes that she's got good reasons to believe what she believes, and I'm interested in exploring what those reasons might be. I think it would be interesting to understand what she felt was a lot of research, and what the nature of that research, and how that research has led her to her confidence. But it feels at this point that the research holds up the claim of the historicity of Jesus, and the historicity of Jesus holds up the claim that the Christian God is true. So a lot of, I think, conversations in SE are about trying to find the trunk of the belief, the epistemological root that holds up the rest of the position, so that you can make sure that you're addressing the right part of the belief. But yeah, I'm very interested to hear how you guys thought it was going.
Yeah, it seemed like there were a lot of different routes that we could have gone down. Like like the reason of I've seen it work in so many different ways, or the inability to investigate it, or like anything is possible. Can you maybe take us through your process on how you decided which route to go down?
Yeah, you're right that sometimes the conversations can be like this. For me, it feels like there's just so many things being thrown out that it's almost impossible to know which rabbit to chase. I tend to find that eventually the similar themes will keep coming up. And I felt like the moment we talked about the exploration of alternatives, there is a God, and he's bad, or there's no God. I felt like that was a strong set of claims that clearly had been explored. And if Leslie had proposed those questions, I was really interested to know how she resolved those, and so that's what got me interested in this side of the conversation. I feel like the other pieces were post hoc rationalizations. It felt to me like the idea of having seen the works in the world. I think once you have an interpretive framework, once you're ready to believe that something is a certain way, you're going to see it in places even when it isn't there. And I think that had the character of that. I think that when you have the sort of confirmation bias effect, it can be very difficult to not see things a certain way.
So you feel
It felt
like
like that.
uh, you feel like exploring the alternative explanations might be a better way to go, rather than um, personal experience as far as sufficient reason or method.
Yeah, I think personal experience is like everything in many ways is interpretive, right? And I think if you're primed a certain way, then you're going to be convinced of it. We could disprove a particular event that she may have seen was or was not divinely influenced in some way, but that would only talk about that one event. It wouldn't talk about why she chose to see it that way, which was perhaps the more important component.
Yeah, it's all good stuff. Hopefully Leslie will come back and we can finish up. Early, Alfonso, did you have any comments or questions about how the conversation has gone so far with Leslie?
Please be as rude as you like. I'm very open to criticism.
Go ahead, Alfonso.
Leaping on me now. Okay.
No, I was gonna say the approach you took at the beginning of let's just have a conversation. That's what I often do, and it's not. I don't state it that way because I usually do. I call them one-on-ones, and I do them on Clubhouse mostly. I've been fortunate enough to have a few people approach me and just ask me, I want to have I would really love to talk to you. And it hasn't been because of street epistemology necessarily, just because of my openness when I speak to people of different beliefs. And you'll see on my profile, I had a talk with a British friend called German, and we reviewed that with David and Early and some other people. And it often starts like that. And he was really thankful that I was taking notes and listening. And so I think that's a good approach, to not put it out there that you're necessarily doing or practicing street epistemology. It's not a necessity, but I do clarify. I mean, if I'll share where I've learned this, and I also view SC as a tool. So I had some other comments earlier, but I think Leslie's back.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, welcome back, Leslie. Hope
I'm so
everything's
sorry.
okay.
My battery went dead, as you probably surmised.
You exploded in a puff of oopses. That was good.
You heard me say oops as I realized, oh no.
I did indeed. I was going to claim it was divine intervention, but I wouldn't be so cheap.
Perhaps, yeah. I was like, Leslie's going to say something stupid. Let's just pull the plug.
Yeah, I hope you don't feel like that. I know sometimes these conversations can be a little bit. They can feel, it's hard to notice sometimes as the person talking and asking the questions whether or not the conversation feels pressured. So, like, if at any point this feels like you just want to take a break, or would want to take a step out of the conversation, just let me know, because like I don't want to have this conversation at the expense of your comfort. Are you okay to carry on?
Yes.
Awesome. So I think we were talking about the historicity of Jesus, and you mentioned, I think you did research.
Right, yes.
And
Yes, and since then, I would say recently, I mean, I've done talking to, on SE and some other places, talking to atheists who bring their, and plus I've seen the debates online, everybody's seen those, and yes, so I've done my homework. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I'm open to more, if there's something new out there I've not encountered, I'm certainly open to it. Yeah.
So the historical Jesus, like the claim that historical Jesus was in fact God and the Son of God, is quite a remarkable claim.
Yeah, I agree. But caveat, I mean, you hear this, what was that common phrase? Spectacular claims deserve spectacular evidence, or something like that.
Extraordinary
But
claims require
right.
extraordinary evidence. Sagan's
Yeah,
standard.
Yeah, but it doesn't make any sense when you start to think about it, in my opinion, my humble opinion, because God is an extraordinary claim. If there's only one God that's existed throughout all eternity, then it is a singularity and therefore is extraordinary by definition. So in order to say anything about that, it would be, it has it built into it. So I'm not sure it's valuable to actually say things like, but I could be wrong.
I think that that Sagan's standard, because I think it was Carl Sagan who came up with the phrasing of it that way.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't speak to whether or not something is true. I think it's only speaking to the necessity. What even was that? There was far too many letters in there. The necessity for evidence for extraordinary things to be equally extraordinary. And I can. So if I was to tell you that I owned a car, would you find that?
Yeah, no, I've heard this argument many, many times.
Oh, okay, awesome.
I don't find it compelling, but you can go through it again if you'd like.
Oh, well, no. So how? I'm trying to think of how to skip to the end of that without going through the motions of it.
Well, we were talking about the level of research I've done, and.
So okay, well, yeah. It's good. So let's say then this that the claim, Jesus's claim is quite extraordinary, and you've done some research, which you admit it's possible that your research was wrong, but you think it's unlikely. What did you discover in your research that convinced you of the truth of the historicity of Jesus?
So there's different levels to that, right? The first level is they're the mythicists, and it started, I think, around 1900s. There was a group that's recently resurfaced, but is pretty much debunked, definitely among all serious academics that I can tell. So I've done my research there. So the mythicist one doesn't really work. And then there's the historical Jesus, quote unquote, the historical Jesus versus the spiritual Jesus. I mean, right? I think it was Benjamin Franklin, or maybe it was Thomas Jefferson, who went through, and I think it was Ben Franklin, who went through the Bible and just cut out all the miracle parts and just had the word parts. To be honest, even if you cut out all the miracle parts and you just had the word parts, I would still be inclined to believe this person was extremely wise. I'm not sure what the word would be, because the Sermon on the Mount for me is an extraordinary treatise on life and how to live life. For those who don't know, it's just a collection of his sermons, and they called it the Sermon on the Mount, I guess because there was a mountain there. He wouldn't have to talk about it. But it's an extraordinary work.
Would it be extraordinary even if it wasn't true?
Well, that he said it, or the words in it are not necessarily true or false. They're ways to live life. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing when you're giving, things like that.
But could he? Sorry, let me reframe that. Was lazily worded. Could he have delivered that sermon and not been the incarnation of God?
Of course, yes. I've already said that, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And Jesus could be a historical person and not have been the incarnation of God.
Absolutely. I think it's fairly proven that Jesus was a historical person. I don't think that's very controversial among scholars. Even atheist scholars don't really go there anymore. Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah. So, right. Yeah. So this thing that happened 2,000 years ago, I'm supposed to change my life for that? Are you kidding me? It's a good response, you know?
So in your researches, what convinced you not of the historicity of Jesus, but of his divinity?
Well, I think he claimed to be divine. I mean, if you look at it, and sure, it's very difficult to actually extrapolate that out from the rest of it and say, well, that belongs, that doesn't belong, that belongs. That's a little bit like playing God. Ha ha ha. Right? So it's a matter of study and bringing yourself to the text. So something else I didn't say was, when I was exploring this back in the day, I felt like I had to bring myself to it, and I had to encounter it the way it was presented. And I know there's a lot about precept, and I don't think this is presuppositionalism or whatever that is. I don't think it is. I thought, if there is a God and that God has somehow communicated, then I have to look at it from that perspective, not my own. And what that caused me to do is to be very authentic about the way I looked at it. So eventually I got to the point where I'd say something like, okay, what about the starving children in Africa? And then I'd think, well, wait a minute. If the starving children in Africa went away tomorrow, would that affect my belief? And I'd be like, nope. Or my lack of belief, nope. So that's off the table. We're not going to look at that. So when I looked at it from that perspective. And I forgot your question, but it was relevant.
So I was asking about what was it about your research that led you to conclude that Jesus was indeed divine?
Right. So I brought all that to the table. I brought to the table, looking at the research, I brought to the table my reactions to the research. I brought to the table my looking at the world and trying it on, really. Okay, what happens when I look at the world through this lens? Does it make any sense whatsoever? Right? Okay, let's take it off. Let's put it back on again. Things like that. The historicity of Jesus as God. Okay, so one of the really big questions I felt based on, why isn't God more obvious? Dude, if you're God. So I had to tackle that, which is actually more of a philosophical issue than it is a theological or a research issue. So that's part of it. So it's not just a question of what convinced me in the literature that Jesus claimed to be God. I think that's pretty clear. So I think you're asking me about the documents themselves. and whether they're accurate.
I think I'm asking what was persuasive to you personally. What was the point? So it could be possible that Jesus. Let me reframe that as a question. Could it be possible that Jesus was historically true and claimed to be divine, but wasn't divine?
Sure, it's possible that Jesus didn't exist, but that's very unlikely. It's possible that Jesus existed and didn't claim to be God. Maybe that's somewhat likely. And it's possible that Jesus existed and claimed to be God and wasn't. And then there's the last one who claimed that Jesus existed, claimed to be God, and was. The fact that Jesus existed and wasn't God is definitely something to explore. However, he was extremely arrogant if he wasn't God. He just had his, I don't know, as it comes across to me, if he wasn't actually who claimed to be, then he was both insightful and arrogant at the same time, I guess, which is possible, but it doesn't seem likely.
It doesn't seem likely that somebody could be arrogant.
And insightful about the human condition and compassionate at the same time? I don't know. Probably not. Not to that level.
Are there people in modern times that represent an arrogant and give the impression of insightfulness and compassion? I'm thinking of myself, obviously.
Give the impression, absolutely. You think about these actors, who play these roles, and they just make your heart bleed. You're like, oh, that's just so insightful of pain and yet hope. And then you hear them being interviewed, and you think, well, that guy's a jerk. And you think, how can that happen? How can somebody be both? But here's the difference. The difference is we have the actual words, and so it's not just a portrayal of something. That's if you believe that those are the actual words that he spoke and he came up with. So I think it's a bit different than that.
Is it possible that a true historical Jesus who happened to be arrogant, insightful, and compassionate could have spoken those words and not been divine?
I doubt it.
Okay. How can we understand that? So how could I understand that? So I can imagine that there are people in this world that are arrogant, insightful, and compassionate. And I'm sure there are people in this world that claim to be divine.
Yeah, I agree.
So how could we go about understanding whether or not these people are truly who they say they are?
Well, I kind of skipped a step when I talked about, as I began to explore this, because I think exploring whether there's a God or not is a crucial human endeavor, because we're all stuck in this predicament, and I think that predicament is twofold. We're all going to die, and everybody we love is going to die. That's part of it. But the other part of it is we're kind of cruddy. Right now there are children dying of starvation. And we know there are children dying of starvation. And we could actually solve it. If we have enough food, we could do it, and we're not doing it. So we're stuck with, as far as I'm concerned, we're stuck with two problems that make it, well, actually I can think of a third one, but make it worth our while to investigate this. But that was so. Even though the answers are not easy and it's not necessarily obvious which way to go, I think it's something people should look into.
Yeah. So you and I are both skeptics. So as a skeptic, when a potentially historical figure claims to be divine and has the characteristics of being arrogant, insightful, and compassionate.
Well, if the arrogant only applies if it's not what the person claims. So we're not making that.
That's true. Okay, sure. Okay. How, as a skeptic, can we go about understanding whether or not we should believe this to be true?
Well, I guess there's a couple things to look at. One would be the corpus of the words in general, right? What's the, instead of, cherry picking, like look at the corpus of the person's life and the corpus of their actions, actually the idea of fruit. And I believe that comes from the New Testament. It comes from Jesus. You judge somebody by the fruit of their, I know it does come from that. I'm not sure there was a earlier reference or not. You look at what's produced by that, that relationship. And then there's an extra component here for me, and that is, okay, if this is God, if it represents this real thing, then I should be able to interact with it in some way that produces something valuable in my life. Or I'm not saying this very eloquently, but I need to look for relationships between me and my existence in the world and this text, if you will, to see if it has any.
Could we say that we were looking to see if it was testable? The claim was testable?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah.
Awesome. And that, as a skeptic, I would totally agree that that's like a thing we would look for.
Yeah.
So how did you test the divinity of Jesus?
Well, I've done it on multiple. The divinities. I've done what this thing is, what we're going to call it, I don't know, but I've done this thing where, and I've advised other people to do it. It's like, look, you've put an effort in, the ball's in God's court. You just go about your business and see what happens. And so I've done that. I've done it on multiple occasions, and some of them I'm kind of reluctant to actually talk about, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't talk about anything you're not comfortable talking about. I think, is there any examples you could give of a time that you feel comfortable giving, of a time that you've tested the divinity of Jesus and able to verify it?
Divinity of Jesus. I don't often phrase it that way, so I'm kind of trying to figure out what that, how that. So you're saying there might be a God, but it's not Jesus? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's certainly possible. I think we have a claim that Jesus was the Son of God and indeed God, and
right,
that is either true or not true. Yeah. So the divinity, that is what I would refer to as the divinity of Jesus. And so how can we test the divinity of Jesus?
I think we have to. Okay, well, so there's an assumption I think that a lot of people make, which is probably pretty valid, that that this is like a scientific thing where we can, check the boiling point of water. Yep, it boils at, I don't know, what is it, 39 degrees Celsius? I don't know what exactly it is. Yep, here it is. Check. Let's go communicate this to other people. When it comes to God, if there is a God, and that God is somewhat personal in his or her relationship to mankind, that God gets to dictate how they interact. And as I said, I had to see it through the framework. I skipped over this a little bit, but the framework of how that's presented to me. And again, authenticity is woven throughout it. Where's your heart? Where's your heart? Where's your heart? What are your motives here? So you cannot actually even ask. It's a very personal kind of encounter. And so I don't think my answers are going to make much sense. I don't think it's designed to be that way. It's not designed to be something, and there are theists who do believe that you can just go A, B, C, D, God. I actually don't think you can do that. I think it's more, I can give you A, B, C, but in order to get to D, that's going to take something on your part.
So the divinity of Jesus wouldn't be testable in a way that would be replicatable to anybody else. It would only work for you. Is that right?
The reasons the divinity of Jesus wouldn't be testable. Yeah, I can give you I can give you some reasons, but I think they're going to be wholly inadequate. My guess is.
Sure.
So, for example, I had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the times when I didn't believe in God. So actually, I flitted for 10 years there, and so much so, it was when you get cancer and they go in the hospital, they ask you, what were you going to name your first child? They just ask you questions and questions and questions and questions. And eventually I got to the point, and they do this every single time you go in. I said, I'm an atheist. So it was pretty strong at that point. But I realized something during that experience, and it was very interesting to watch, because I watched all the people who in my support groups who got cancer, and all of a sudden they were open to things they were never open to before. And you think, okay, it's because you're going to die and you're looking at alternatives, but it's actually not that. What it is, or at least what it was for me, and I think it was for others, is this realization that there's a hidden reality to life that, at least in our culture, the first world culture, we've put aside and we don't even see it anymore, but it's extremely real. There are people dying all the time, and death and our mortality is real, although we never actually, we brush it aside. We don't kind of own it. We don't look into it. And because there's this hidden reality, all of a sudden I was open to all kinds of hidden realities. It's like, oh, holy crap. What else is going on that I'm completely ignoring? Because I just, it just doesn't come to my radar. My world just doesn't push it through. And that gave me an openness to believe in things that are hidden, but nonetheless very true.
How did you come to know that there were things in the world that were hidden, if they were hidden?
Because death is hidden.
Because
and I think we both agree on that.
Death is hidden?
Absolutely. We used to live in cultures where we killed the food ourselves, right? Where we lived with our grandparents, and we used to see these things. I assume those cultures had a much more visceral, much more hands-on approach, a realization of what death was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have that today. At least not in my culture, maybe in yours.
So, as an atheist and as a fellow skeptic, how is there any way you could help me understand why I should believe in the divinity of Jesus?
I don't think you should. I think you should explore it. We'd have to get into what you've done and talk about it, but I can't tell you to believe in something that you don't believe in. All I can tell you is my story, and yeah, that's it. I mean, I find Jesus stunning, and I find the people, not all the people, I mean, there's a ton of badly representing people, but a certain group of people stunning in terms of how they live life and how they interact with this God, and that's been compelling for me, among other things. But
have you ever been impressed by the nature of people that follow different religions?
Absolutely, but not to the same degree, and not even all Christians, just certain, yeah.
So you find some people who follow Jesus to be impressive.
Yeah, because here's what they can hold in their hand. I've met people who can hold in their hand this idea that they are sinners. That's the Christianese on top of it. But they're not who they want to be. They've not achieved it. They are not the be all end all, and have this empowerment at the same time. And to put those two things together is amazing to me. I don't exactly know how to explain it, but
Could an idea be beautiful and not true, though?
oh gosh, interesting. Right. That's an interesting question. Maybe you'd have to give me an example of an idea that's beautiful and not true.
I'm not sure that I have one.
Okay.
Alice in Wonderland?
You think Alice in Wonderland is beautiful?
I think it has a certain something.
I don't know. It's a good question.
I think that would probably be a good place to end the conversation for now. But
Yeah.
I think it was a really interesting one. I really want to say thank you for your time, and it was fun exploring this with you. I think I don't think I was particularly effective in changing your view, but I don't necessarily think
that wasn't your goal now, was it?
Indeed, exactly that. But yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, it was fun. It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Did any
Sorry,
part
go-
of the, oh no, I just wanted to ask Leslie if there was any part of that where you felt like I could have been clearer or better or would have been more helpful.
I don't know. I mean, it seemed to be the main thrust was, how did Jesus prove his divinity? Seemed to be the main, yeah.
And for me, perhaps the most important question in terms of feedback would be: Did you feel like I was listening to what you had to say? That's awesome. Thank you.
I do. I think you did a wonderful job. Yeah, I think there's probably 5 more conversations that could be had, but
yeah, I would be up for that for sure.
But yeah, no, I think you were very respectful and very. I did notice you catched yourself a few times.
Yes, always tricky. So sometimes you get echoes of conversations in the past, and you try to jump a few steps and realize that you're not necessarily
right.
articulating.
To me, when you go to the chase and just go, okay, what would it take for me to believe? What would you say? That's actually helpful, but maybe it does have to be there after you've gone through the other steps. But yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I was hoping before you leave, Leslie, if I could maybe ask a couple of questions about how the conversation went.
Sure.
Yeah. So, would I be right to assume that you've probably had conversations about your beliefs with people that don't practice street epistemology? Would that be fair?
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Can you maybe, do you mind telling us a little bit about the differences in the conversations that you've had with people that don't practice street epistemology? Compare those with the one that you had with Will here.
Yeah. Sure. Yes. Sorry, I'm hesitating. It's just that there's different types of conversation with people, and there's like little one-off little things on the internet where you just have a few texts back and forth and you're done, and then there's more longer conversations. I learned a long time ago not to engage with people who just want to argue for argument's sake. So no, street epistemology is lovely in the sense that it feels very respectful, and you get a chance to air your beliefs, if not explore them. I think I'm a fairly introspective person, so it would be really hard for you to get to something I haven't explored already on my own. But it's possible. So I think, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So like the style of conversation um, is you were saying it's you feel like it's respectful and helps you explore stuff.
It does. I think it could go deeper, but yeah, I do think it's far better than what I've seen elsewhere, yes, and participated in elsewhere.
Awesome.
Can I
Um,
ask
yeah, go
Leslie a
ahead.
question? Leslie, do you at all feel compelled to uh, learn how to ask these questions, how to do a street epistemology, have an SE conversation?
I think I said I was already involved with the SC community on Discord.
Do you so you actually do SE interactions with others, and where you're asking the questions more than
Yes,
posing the
I've done
claim?
that. Uh-huh.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
cool, awesome.
Yeah.
Because I would love to, yeah, and I didn't. I was just about to say, it would be lovely to have a spiritual religious community undertaking this, because we've had a lot of people come in and say that it's what was the word they used? It's a nefarious attempt at whatever that they call it nefarious, and
Right. That's because of well, there's reasons for that, right? Some of the baggage doesn't help, and you go to the Discord server and half the people there say, "Oh, I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist." It's like, okay, wait a minute, And Anthony goes and talks to atheist groups and et cetera, et cetera. So, you know,
yeah,
there's
yeah, absolutely.
there's reason for that, right? But nonetheless, I do think it's a very respectful type of conversation. Um,
And
yeah.
I think it trains anyone, no matter what you believe in, to ask questions that are vital to your beliefs, to the person that you're interacting
Well,
beliefs.
yes and no. I do think you have to have the introspection piece, and I don't. What I've seen, I've not seen SE teach that. To really get down to what your motives are is huge. And there's a misnomer that theists have motives and atheists don't. Everybody has motives, right? I, and I would
Yeah.
love to see that addressed more. Um,
We talk about different steps, especially with the SE course that's being developed. And there's this idea about step zero, which is really having a good grasp on what your goal is for the conversation and your mindset before even before the conversation even gets started. Um, and there are also some things touched about that you mentioned in the ethics module that's being developed also. So I would definitely look out for that if those are some of the concerns you have. And it's funny because I wanted to ask this question today because it keeps coming up in my mind, and this might have to do with that a little bit. But I was going to ask Will. Um, so we talk about goals, and a lot of the answer, or a lot of the times, a lot of the questions that I get can be answered by figuring out what your goal is. And so, I guess my question uh, is is having the goal of persuading somebody or convincing somebody okay? Is that an okay goal to have if you're gonna conduct an SE conversation? And uh, if the goal is to convince somebody of something, are you then not following the guidelines of an SE conversation? Maybe you can kind of help me out with that.
Yeah, I think persuasion is something we should be very wary of in SE. To me, I think if you have a goal of persuasion, the locus of the conversation, the center of it, becomes superficially in the person you're talking to, but really it's you deciding whether you've sufficiently won the conversation. So the real focus of the conversation is actually you winning, and that's, I think, antithetical to the goals of street epistemology. Really, I like to think of street epistemology as temporarily allowing somebody else to use your mental models to explore their beliefs. And the locus of the conversation should be in the person you're speaking to at all times. And if you feel that it's shifting to you, such that you're delivering messages which, making claims of your own, or trying to steer the conversation in a direction that you want it to go, then you're no longer letting the conversation reside in the person you're speaking to. It's very easy to fall into, but yeah, I would avoid it at all costs.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, yes. And I agree with all of that you said. Sometimes it depends on which practitioner you're talking to. So like for instance, some some um, some say that you can use street epistemology to engage in a debate, or you can use street epistemology to try to convince somebody to get vaccinated. So I guess I'm just trying to get your take on that so that I can understand
Yeah.
uh, that kind of conflict that I see. Do you see that conflict at all, or?
Oh God, yes. Yeah, no. This bothers me a lot, and this is the tool versus the objective problem, I think, and I think it's a real problem in the street epistemology community. I think, firstly, it comes back to this fundamental principle about, like, what is the objective of SE, and as I say, the objective should be the other person exploring their beliefs using your help, essentially. But that's it. It's not. One of the things that's interesting is that many people in the street epistemology community are encountering ideas like critical thinking, active listening, mirroring and reflecting, those kinds of techniques. I think they're encountering them for the first time in the form of their presence in the street epistemology toolkit. And therefore, I think they are confusing critical thinking and active listening, etc., and the other tools, as confusing them with street epistemology. For them, they're synonymous. And so any time, for example, they're employing critical thinking, for them, they might feel that they're doing SE. Any time that they are employing active listening, they're doing SE. Where actually, I believe you're only doing street epistemology if you have the explicit goal of helping somebody else explore the reasons why they hold their beliefs. If you have any other, so to me it's entirely the objective. It's not the tools. Those tools are effective at helping you achieve that goal, but they could also be effective at achieving other goals. For example, active listening is used in hostage negotiation. I don't think we would say that hostage negotiation is the same as street epistemology. So I think we need to stop confusing, as a community, I think it would be great to stop confusing the objective with the tool chain. And I think that would be beneficial. I don't think we should be okay with the idea that street epistemology can be used in debate. I think critical thinking can be. I think active listening can be. But I don't think that would be an act of street epistemology. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot. It's basically saying someone can use active listening, but and not be engaged in street epistemology.
Right.
And same goes for critical thinking and yeah. Okay.
And the problem is a lot of people within the community, they're encountering these tools, as I say, for the first time in this big bag labeled street epistemology. And so I think that they feel that any time you're using these tools. So I've heard all kinds of things about, what street epistemology is and its objectives. So it's a way of improving conversations. It's a way of convincing others in conversations. It's a way of persuading people or inducing doubt. That one I dislike tremendously. I think any tool that's just uniquely good at inducing doubt in all cases seems very unhelpful to me. And so certainly I think you could use the tools within that toolbox to achieve those goals, but that doesn't make any one of them street epistemology. I think it's anything. In fact, you don't have to use those tools. As I mentioned before, if you were to have this imagine a magic tablet you could take, and in taking that tablet you induced a very true and honest self-reflection on your beliefs. Well, that tablet would be being prescribed by street epistemologists, because that tablet would be an effective way of achieving the goal of street epistemology. And so we're only using the tools of active listening and critical thinking, etc., because they are the best tools we have found to encourage other people to honestly reflect on their beliefs.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
There's that might be antithetical to entertainment. So we live in a very entertainment-centric culture, and obviously we talked about the audience effect. But if you're actually doing SE right, it could be somewhat boring for the spectators. We'd rather see a fight than,
Yeah.
So I wonder if we have to fight that.
I used to find it really hard to watch SE conversations. I think you just have to become passionate about, did I say compassionate or become passionate? That's what I meant. To actually enjoy people having a conversation for an hour or over an hour. They're really boring, I think. But it's the fact that your passions align with whatever's happening there. Sorry for.
I just wanted to. I was just checking the room to make sure that Reed wasn't present, because I refuse to be nice about him if he's actually able to listen to me. But honestly, watching Reed's conversations to me I just find fascinating, because it seems like Olympic level patience that he deploys, and most of Reed's conversations are watching a man sitting there emotionless, listening intently to somebody talking, just sort of. And chipping in the odd sort of sentence or two from the sidelines. It's just that they're so uniquely placed. It's but in terms of you compare that to a sort of frothing at the mouth, atheist destroys theism or theist destroys atheism debate. The other is definitely much more entertaining to watch. Unless you really love the sport, in which case maybe you can watch a master at work.
This subject actually came up. I think it was Quaid and I were talking about this, and how we could make, we're just kind of spitballing it, and how can we make SE more entertaining? And we decided that we were just going to have, like, during an SE conversation in the background, we could have people in bikinis and explosions happening on motorcycles. And
see, why are we not doing this? That's amazing. That's exactly what we should be doing.
Well, this is one of the questions I wanted to ask you, was like, what are some of your ideas to kind of overcome that? Because the way I see it is, you really have to know what to be looking for in an SE conversation to be, I don't know if entertained is the right word, but I kind of get, I don't know, I get captivated by a lot of the ones that you can pull up on YouTube. And I think it has to do with knowing what to look for. So yeah, that was.
Well, hold on
maybe,
a second.
Go ahead.
I get a little suspicious when you say that. It's almost like you're looking for the technique that manipulates the conversation in a way. And I know that that's probably not what you meant, but dig into that. Tell me what you mean.
Yeah, I can totally see how that could have been interpreted that way. I really am looking for questions that cause aporia, or that, like you said, that self-reflection in the conversation partner. That's kind of what I look out for, and it doesn't matter what the claim is, but learning how to respectfully ask the questions that is going to cause the conversation partner to take another look at the sufficiency and the reliability of the methods that they're using, or the reasons that they're using. That's kind of what interests me, I guess.
Can I say no, 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 no to
Yes.
that? You're assuming that it's to me, I'm demonstrating active listening when I do that. So I'm sorry, Deviant. What's your real name?
Oh, Will.
Will?
Will, yes.
Will, so when Will asks a question and I have to reframe what I'm thinking to fit his question, it's not about me reflecting what I'm saying necessarily. It could be, but it's more about me being respectful of Will and thinking, okay, Will's seeing it from this perspective. How can I engage what I'm talking about to fit how he sees this? But it does not at all necessarily imply that I am rethinking something in a different way, because I may have and usually have already thought it. I think you guys give yourself, too much credit for the pauses in the conversation, when a lot of times they're just a way of thinking about how to phrase something. So, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, you might be right about that. It definitely requires my interpretation of what's happening with the other person. Um, it just seems like the likelihood that they're possibly thinking about something that they haven't thought about before, like those signs,
Yeah.
they could be pointing at other things, definitely. I could be totally misinterpreting what's going on. Um, so yeah,
That's really cool, by the way. I think there are definitely moments in those conversations where somebody can be genuinely staggered for a moment, and it doesn't mean that their position is any less established. It just means that they've just been. You can. I confuse people by using words I just made up just then. I didn't intend to, but I just made a stupid word for no reason, and I said it badly, and that can confuse people. And in that moment, they can seem like they're pausing. Um, but I think this is the sign of true street epistemology. I don't want to defeat your position. Like, defeating the position is not the goal. And I think often in debate, when you've got somebody, quote unquote, on the metaphorical ropes here, and they're kind of flustered and unable to answer, there's some sort of victory claimed in that moment of pausing and hesitation and uncertainty. But actually, I think that's uniquely uncharitable in any case. And secondly, I think it's not aligned with the objectives of street epistemology. What you really want to do is exactly as David said, you just want, even if the only thing that's caused them to pause is that they've suddenly thought about something very slightly differently, it doesn't really necessarily have to in any way influence their confidence. But just the mere fact of thinking about something slightly differently, I think, is a genuine win in street epistemology, encouraging them to notice something about the way they've been thinking about things before, and just frame it slightly differently. I think that's worth having any day.
Yeah, and as a theist who feels a little bit on the ropes, or a little bit, the odd man out a lot of times, I would love to see it be more about exploration of ideas. If you could phrase it that way, instead of, I'm going to try to make you rethink something that, I don't know any theist today who's not constantly confronted with. I mean, I've been that my entire life, or the entire time I've been a Christian. You're constantly confronted with other ideas. How could you not be? Especially the internet. You're constantly confronted with the other guy. And in order to actually have somebody actually explore it, you need a safe environment, which I think rapport is all about. So if you really wanted people to explore their ideas, it has to be super safe. It has to be super kind of, which means, oh, let's talk about it. Oh, that's interesting. And give them space to explore it. That's my.
I
Yeah,
was recently. Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And part of the having the right mindset about or before engaging in a conversation and then throughout the conversation is creating that safe space to have with your conversation partner and constantly checking in and making sure that they are comfortable and that they do feel safe talking about this. So yeah, I'm totally on board with what you said. I was curious uh, if if you could um, maybe give us an example of how that idea of exploration could have been better demonstrated in the conversation that you had with Will, if you don't mind.
Well, yeah. So I've taken my own medicine and said, okay, Leslie, if you think that, how would you implement that? And I thought about it. So I picked something that I was the opposite of, which was Trump. I don't get why people support Trump, and I apologize to anybody here who does that. And I thought, if I was really going to be honest about it and have a really authentic conversation, I wouldn't at all try to convince them of anything. I would just try to understand their point of view. So it would be all about exploration. And if I said anything antithetical, it would be, oh, well, what about this, to see if it impacted how they thought. I would try to actually become a Trump supporter while I was having the conversation. I would try to have them convince me if I was going to really be supportive of it, and so that I can understand their framework. Convince
Yeah,
me.
I
Not
think.
in a, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, my apologies. Sorry. I was just going to say this is exactly what I didn't like about Peter Boghossian's, idea that religious people don't use rationality. Like, if you start with that assumption, firstly, I don't know on what basis you feel a conversation is going to be any use. If somebody's not rational, conversation is not going to be much of a use in any case. Or if they don't value reason, for example, then I don't think you can reason them into valuing it. But the idea that you have to be empathetic with the person you're speaking to. If you can't recognize that you could be in their position,
Yeah.
if your experiences had been different, and if your mental machinery was different, even. There's nobody I could not be. There's the famous, would you have been a Nazi in Nazi Germany? If you can't recognize the fact that there's a very good chance you could have been a Nazi in Nazi Germany and probably would have been, then I think street epistemology is going to be very difficult for you. If you can't recognize that people will hold really, really horrible, sometimes ideas, or just ideas you fundamentally disagree with, or even slightly disagree with, for reasons that for them feel perfectly reasonable and rational, and that you're the one that's got the strange view. If you can't recognize that, then I think it's very difficult for you to have these conversations, which is why the sort of atheist versus theist dynamic is incredibly unhelpful in street epistemology.
Well, there's also a readiness factor. I mean, the scenario of the woman who's being beaten by her husband, right? The horrible scenario in all counts, but people will point it out to her. No, 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 he loves me. No, no, no. She's not ready for whatever that means. And if you're a family member, you yank her out anyway, probably. But for a stranger, the best you can do is recognize, just give them, what you can, and then recognize that it's not totally about logic. Actually, it's not about logic for any of us, I don't think, which is an interesting thing to explore. If you guys think that it's all about logic, and if we just do ABC, we can get to D every time if we have all the information. But that's probably another topic.
certainly think it's about how we might relate to not having all the information. I think I was speaking to a Catholic gentleman recently, and there were definitely a point in our histories where we shared the same philosophical uncertainty. We were talking about the why there's something rather than nothing problem, which is difficult. It's emotionally difficult for human beings to understand why there might be something rather than nothing, and clearly this person's uncertainty with that position or discomfort with that position led him to Catholicism. Well, I say clearly, but it did lead him to Catholicism. But for me, it led, or at least continued me in the position of atheism. And so the question then becomes, well, how did two people from roughly the same starting position philosophically end up in two different places? And it's interesting that it seemed oftentimes it can be the relationship the religious person has to the not knowing. It's not always the case, but there definitely seems to be sometimes a sort of a different attitude towards the null hypothesis.
Yeah, that would be interesting to explore that. But I'd have to think about it, right? Yeah.
Good stuff. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to respect everybody's time. And I also wanted to maybe reach out to Gina down below. You're welcome to come up on stage and get share your thoughts as well with us. And in the meantime, maybe just on kind of a room level, Leslie, I'm always looking for feedback as far as how this room is, how it goes. I was wondering if you could give us feedback on how we could maybe make the room better, or some comments about how you think it's run, what we could do to change. Um, I'm always kind of up for changing it and having it be, evolving into um, a better room. Do you have any thoughts on some feedback that might be helpful for us?
Yeah, I do actually. As you were talking about it, I thought, okay, what can we do? Street epistemology is pretty mysterious, and it's pretty intimidating. Actually, Clubhouse in general is intimidating. It's like, do I raise my hand now? When do I go up? What do I do? Do I have the right? Right? Do I have the right to be on stage? And I'm wondering if there's some type of survey you could do. I know people on stage can clap their little mute buttons to communicate. If there was a way, and maybe there's not, that you could ask a question of the crowd and say, "Is that clear?" and have everybody.
You,
That I think would be really helpful.
you can actually have them raise their hands, and and we don't have to send them an invite, but if we want to ask a question to the audience, we can ask the question, and then they just press their hands, and as moderators, we can see how many hands are raised and use that as a tally.
Right. So I'd love to see things like how many here feel comfortable, know what a street epistemology is, or, just whatever questions they are, just kind of getting that feedback, I think would be really helpful.
I think the only challenge with that is that nobody else in the audience would be able to see that, and that would be a good thing. Not, I guess it depends on which question we're asking. But yeah, I forgot about being able to use that to get feedback. I appreciate it.
I would invite you all to join me on my little Twitch revolution and attempt to take over Twitch with interesting conversations.
Yeah, and anything else that you want to promote here? Obviously, this is being recorded. It's going up on my YouTube channel. So whatever else you want other people to know within the next couple of minutes that we've got, feel free to share.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, there is I've got an event coming up where I talk to Jacob about his journey from Mormonism to skepticism. That's coming up on December the 11th. I believe 8 o'clock in the afternoon GMT. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Jacob's a super lovely guy. And I recently watched a video. Somebody sent me a video of him doing his first few SE conversations, and the guy is just so natural. It's unnerving. So yeah, really looking forward to talking to Jacob. So that's going to be streamed on Twitch and YouTube, and I think Twitter. We stream on Twitter, which is just a confusing concept. But yeah, so that'll be going out then. But yeah, no, like I genuinely would encourage you guys to think about jumping on to Twitch as a platform potentially. I know Reed is experimenting now with some of his SE conversations going out on there. And I've seen a couple of other people express an interest, and it would be nice to get some traction there. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So before I forget, I want to thank you, Will, for coming on with us today. It's been a little bit less audience engagement lately, but this room was fantastic. I learned quite a bit, and I just appreciate you coming on. You're welcome to come up and join the panel anytime we have a room like this. You don't have to be invited as a guest to come up. I would rather use you as a resource than have you buried in the audience. So if you see us having a room like this, definitely feel free to come up and share if you would like to. Early, thanks again for facilitating the room, and Alfonso for being here, and Leslie for being such a great participant in our room today. You're welcome to come back anytime.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything to say before we end the room?
I'd just like to say thank you for that rather handsome statement, and honestly, thank you everybody. It's been fun. I always love talking about this stuff, and you guys are very charming. So thank you.
I thought it was a great room. I really enjoyed the interaction with Leslie, and it's very very refreshing to see her commitment to skepticism and in the way that she approaches these ideas and philosophies. So that was great. I actually got positive feedback in the back channel about the interaction. So for what that means.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I'm having a one-on-one with Dawood, who asked me to talk with me a couple of weeks ago. We haven't been able to actually do a conversation. We always had a little bit of trouble. But if you look under Street Epistemology, you'll find that conversation scheduled up on the greenhouse. And it's also on my profile. If any of you are interested in listening or reviewing it afterwards, I'd appreciate that. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Yeah, we'll have to check that out. Next Saturday, in this room, we are scheduled to have Chucky from the I Hear You YouTube channel. So yeah, we'll be back next week, and then the following week, we've got Eddie Tracy. And that room is scheduled to start a couple of hours early to accommodate his schedule. So yeah, we'll see everybody next Saturday, if not before. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.
And there you have it. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast and want to join the conversation or just listen in, you can find us in the Street Epistemology Club on the Clubhouse app Saturday afternoon starting at 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Until next time, keep asking questions.